June ran. His small legs pumped as fast as they could across the marble courtyard of Seoul's most prestigious international elementary school, his faded backpack bouncing against his shoulders, his hand clenched so tightly around the wrinkled $5 bill in his pocket that his knuckles had gone white. He had waited 3 months for this moment. He was not going to let it slip away. Hannah. Wait. The girl turned. Sunlight caught her dark hair as she paused beside the fountain, surrounded by her usual crowd of admirers, the kind of children who arrived in chauffeured cars and never once looked back at the ones who walked to school on foot. But Hannah was different. Everyone said so. She smiled at June the way she smiled at everyone, without condition, without judgment. June skidded to a stop in front of her, chest heaving, glasses crooked on his nose. He didn't waste a second catching his breath. He opened his tiny fist and held it out, revealing the crumpled bill inside, soft and worn from being folded and unfolded 100 times. Hannah, he said, his voice trembling but determined, where can I buy a mother's love?
Where can I buy a mother's love?
The words hit the courtyard.
I only have $5.
A teacher who had been calling roll froze with the clipboard still raised. Somewhere behind Hannah, a boy who'd been mocking another child's shoes suddenly went quiet, unsure why the air had changed. Hannah's own smile faltered, her eyes widening, searching June's face for the joke that wasn't there. And a few feet behind her, a man in a dark tailored coat, a man whose name alone made grown adults lower their eyes in the streets of Gangnam, went completely still. He was Hannah's father. Korea's most feared syndicate boss. A man who had ordered things done that he never spoke of aloud, who had built an empire from nothing but fear and precision, who had not felt his own heart move in years. And in that moment, standing in a schoolyard surrounded by children, that heart cracked wide open. Because to understand why a 5-year-old boy believed love could be purchased for $5, you had to go back nearly 6 years to a woman named Aaliyah. She had been 24 then, working 2 jobs in Seoul while chasing a dream that never quite arrived, when she met a man who made her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed in years. He was Korean, ambitious, poor, and utterly convincing. He told her she was the only woman he had ever wanted to marry. He told her their differences didn't matter. He told her 100 things and she believed every one of them because when you are lonely enough, belief is easy. Then she became pregnant. She remembered the exact way his face changed when she told him. Not joy. Not fear even. Just a slow, deliberate retreat, like a door closing softly enough that you almost didn't hear the click. It's not mine, he had said, flatly. Like reciting a line he'd rehearsed. How can you say that? She had whispered, her hands trembling over her stomach. You know it's yours. You know. I have nothing to offer a child, he cut her off. I have nothing to offer you. Go home, Aaliyah. He left that night and never came back. She gave birth alone in a small hospital room with no family beside her, no husband's hand to hold, just a nurse who kept glancing at her with quiet pity. Twins. A boy and a girl, both with delicate Korean features that made the nurses gasp softly when they saw them. She named the boy June. She named the girl Mina. She loved them. She told herself that every single day, even as something inside her slowly closed like a fist. She worked long hours to keep food on the table and clothes on their backs and school fees paid on time. But every time she looked at their faces she saw him. The man who denied them before they'd even taken their first breath. Every rejection she suffered afterward, every man who smiled at her until he learned she had 2 children waiting at home and then quietly disappeared, added another layer to the wall around her heart. She never hugged them. Not because she didn't love them. She told herself that over and over, lying awake at night. She just didn't know how anymore. Love had become a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Mommy, 6-year-old Mina whispered one night, crawling into her mother's bed, can I sleep next to you? Just tonight. Go back to your room, Mina, Aaliyah said, staring at the ceiling. You're too old for this. But I had a bad dream. Mina. Her voice cracked on the name, though she didn't understand why. Please. Go back to bed. The little girl's feet patted softly across the floor. Aaliyah heard the door close. She pressed her palm against her own mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. Every night after that, Mina whispered the same question to her brother in the dark of their shared room. Does Mommy not like us, June? And every night, June had no answer. He was 5 years old and already carrying the weight of a question no child should ever have to hold. Then Marcus arrived. He was a wealthy black American businessman in his 50s, charming in the way that powerful men often are, generous with compliments and dinners and promises. Aaliyah, starving for any proof that she was still worthy of being chosen, fell hard and fast. But Marcus made one thing clear from the very first month. "I didn't sign up to raise somebody else's kids," he told her one evening, swirling wine in his glass while the twins sat in the next room, pretending not to listen. "You understand that, right? They're good children, Marcus. They're quiet. They won't be a burden." "Every child is a burden eventually," he said coldly. "I'm not their father. Don't expect me to act like one." Aaliyah nodded, because nodding was easier than losing another man. And slowly, without even realizing what she was doing, she began pouring every ounce of warmth she had left into keeping Marcus satisfied, terrified that if she gave one more inch of herself to her children, she would lose the only adult attention she had left. The twins watched their mother smile at Marcus across the dinner table nearly every single night. She never smiled at them like that. Not once. It was June who first came up with the idea, one afternoon while he and Mina sat on the curb outside their small apartment, watching other children get picked up by parents who kissed their foreheads and swung them into hugs. "Maybe Mommy doesn't know how," June said quietly, staring at his shoes. "Doesn't know how to what?" "Love us." He turned to his sister. "Maybe it's like a doctor's visit. Maybe you have to pay for it." Mina blinked at him. "Pay for love." "I have $5, June said, pulling the crumpled bill from where he'd hidden it inside an old sock in his drawer. He'd been saving it for months, refusing every piece of candy, every toy his classmates flaunted in front of him. "I'm going to find out where you buy it. And then I'm going to buy some for you so you stop crying every night." Mina's eyes filled with tears. "You do that? For me?" "You're my sister," June said simply, as if it were the only explanation needed in the whole world. He didn't know who to ask. He was 5. His whole world was school and home and the ache of watching other families function the way his never had. So he decided to ask the kindest person he knew. Which brought the story back to that courtyard. Back to the frozen silence. Back to a mafia boss whose chest had just been cracked open by a question he never expected to hear in his life. That night, the man sat alone in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey in front of him, staring at nothing. His men had learned long ago never to disturb him during these silences, but tonight the silence itself felt unbearable. "Where can I buy a mother's love? I only have $5. The words wouldn't leave him. He had sat through hostile negotiations with rival syndicates without blinking. He had made decisions that ended lives without losing a single hour of sleep. And now a 5-year-old boy's trembling voice had lodged itself somewhere in his chest and refused to move. He summoned his most trusted lieutenant. "Find out everything about that boy," he said. "The one with the glasses. The one who spoke to my daughter today." "Sir, it was just a strange thing a child said. Kids say things." "Find out everything," he repeated, his voice dropping into the register that made even hardened men flinch. "His family. His mother. Where he lives. Everything. Tonight." The lieutenant bowed quickly and left. The mansion around him, for all its marble floors and imported chandeliers and priceless art, had felt hollow for years. His wife had died when Hannah was young, a car accident he still refused to speak about, and since then the halls had echoed with a silence that no amount of wealth could fill. Hannah was his entire world, but even she had grown up mostly in the care of Chioma, their Nigerian nanny, a woman in her mid-20s who had somehow managed to fill the mansion with more warmth in a single afternoon than he'd managed in years. He found Chioma in the kitchen the next evening, humming softly while she prepared dinner, Hannah perched on a stool beside her, giggling at something she'd said. "Chioma," he said. "Hannah mentioned she's been bringing friends home from school. A boy and a girl." Chioma's humming stopped. She glanced at Hannah, who suddenly seemed very interested in the pattern on the countertop. "You're not in trouble, sweetheart," he said gently to his daughter, and Hannah's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Their names are June and Mina," Hannah said quietly. "They're really nice, Appa. But I think something's wrong at their house. June never smiles unless Mina's happy first. And Mina always looks like she's waiting for someone to say something nice to her, and nobody ever does." Chioma's expression softened with something that looked almost like recognition. "I've seen them a few times when I pick Hannah up," she admitted. "There's a sadness in them that doesn't belong on children that young." The mafia boss said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, "Bring them here. If Hannah wants to invite them, let her." The following afternoon, Hannah snuck June and Mina into the mansion through the side garden entrance, giggling the whole way, promising them it would be their secret. Chioma met them in the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, and the moment she saw their faces up close, something in her chest twisted painfully. "Well, hello there," she said warmly, crouching down to their eye level. "You must be June." "And you?" she turned to the little girl hovering half behind her brother, eyes wide and cautious. "You must be Mina. Aren't you just the prettiest thing?" Mina blinked at her, unsure how to respond to a compliment that wasn't followed by a request or a correction. "Are you hungry?" Chioma asked. "I just made some rice cakes. Come sit." The children sat at the massive kitchen island, swallowed by the size of the room, and ate in careful silence while Chioma bustled around them, asking Hannah about her day, laughing at something June said about his teacher, filling the kitchen with the kind of easy warmth neither twin had ever experienced inside their own home. Then, without thinking, without planning it, Chioma reached over and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind Mina's ear, the way a mother might do 100 times a day without even noticing. Mina froze completely. "Sweetheart? Are you all right?" Slowly, tears welled in the little girl's eyes. Her chin trembled. Is this what a mother feels like?" she whispered. The kitchen went silent. Hannah looked between them, confused. June lowered his eyes to his plate, his jaw tight in the way it got when he was trying very hard not to cry in front of people. Chioma's own eyes filled instantly. She knelt down in front of Mina's stool and wrapped her arms around the tiny girl without hesitation. "Yes, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is exactly what it feels like." Mina sobbed into her shoulder, small fists clutching the back of Chioma's blouse like she was terrified of being let go. Chioma held her tighter, rocking gently, tears streaming freely down her own face now. "You are precious," Chioma whispered into her hair. "Do you hear me? You are so precious." From that day on, Chioma became something neither twin had words for yet, but that both of them recognized instantly in their bones. She braided Mina's hair every morning before school. She read them bedtime stories on the evenings Hannah invited them over, doing different silly voices for every character until both children were breathless with laughter. She learned June's favorite meal and made it without ever being asked twice. When Mina's birthday came and went unmarked at home, Chioma quietly baked a small cake and lit a single candle just for her, singing softly while Hannah clapped along. "You are precious," she told them over and over, until the words began to feel less like something foreign and more like something true. Meanwhile, the investigation the Mafia boss had ordered was turning up documents no one had expected. Old hospital records. A faded photograph tucked into a folder that had sat untouched in storage for 6 years. A necklace, one he recognized instantly because he'd bought it himself, a lifetime ago, for a woman he'd loved before fear had made him a coward. He sat in his study long after midnight, spreading the documents across his desk with hands that were not entirely steady. Birth records. Dates. A name. Aaliyah. The room seemed to tilt beneath him. He remembered her. Of course he remembered her. Before the empire, before the fear, before the name that made strangers cross the street, he had been a poor, desperate young man who had fallen in love with a woman who made him feel like more than his circumstances. And when she told him she was pregnant, terror had swallowed every ounce of that love whole. "It's not mine," he had told her. He remembered saying it. He remembered the way her face had crumbled. He remembered leaving that night, telling himself he would come back once he had something to offer, once he was someone worth staying for. By the time he'd clawed his way to power, she was gone. He told himself he'd looked for her. He told himself circumstances had made it impossible. But sitting there now, staring at a photograph of 2 Korean-featured children with his own mother's eyes staring back at him from a 5-year-old's face, he understood the truth with a clarity that nearly broke him in half. He hadn't looked hard enough. Because looking meant facing what he'd done. "They were my children all along," he whispered into the empty study. His hands trembled as he set the photograph down. For the first time in over a decade, tears slid silently down the face of a man an entire country feared. He found Chioma later that night, in the small sitting room where she often stayed up reading after the children were asleep. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice hollow. "And I need you to not look at me the way I deserve to be looked at when I'm finished." He told her everything. Aaliyah. The pregnancy. The denial. The years of silence. Chioma listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable until he finished, his voice breaking on the final sentence. "I abandoned my own children before they were even born." Chioma was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and placed her hand gently over his. "Children don't remember expensive gifts," she said softly. "They remember who stayed." He looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed. "It's too late for me to be the one who stayed." "It's never too late," she said. "It's only too late once you decide it is." While the Mafia boss wrestled with the weight of his discovery, Aaliyah's world was collapsing in a different direction entirely. Marcus had grown crueler by the week, his patience for the twins wearing thinner with every passing day. What had started as cold indifference had curdled into something far worse. "They need to be somewhere else," he told her one night, not even bothering to lower his voice though the children's bedroom door was only a few feet away. "I can't live like this anymore, Aaliyah. It's them or me. Marcus, please, they're my children. And I'm the man who's actually building a life with you," he snapped. "Or did you forget that? Choose." Aaliyah refused. Night after night, she refused, even as the arguments grew louder, even as Marcus's words grew sharper and colder, even as she felt herself shrinking smaller and smaller inside her own home. Then one afternoon, desperate for a moment of peace, she followed Hannah's directions to the address her daughter's chauffeur had once mentioned in passing, wanting only to see with her own eyes what her children did on the days they disappeared to a friend's house after school. She stood outside the mansion gates, half hidden behind a hedge, and watched through the tall windows. June was laughing. Actually laughing, the kind of full, unrestrained laughter she hadn't heard from him in years, as Hannah chased him around the sitting room with a pillow. Mina sat curled against Chioma's side on the couch, listening to a story, her small hand resting trustingly in the older woman's lap. The Mafia boss himself stood in the doorway, watching the children with an expression Aaliyah had never once seen on the face of the man who had denied her all those years ago. Something like tenderness. Something like grief. Something like a man trying desperately to make up for lost time. Her children looked happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way she had never once managed to give them herself. Aaliyah pressed a hand against her mouth and sank down onto the pavement outside the gates, sobbing silently into her palm. That night, she sat across from a lawyer Marcus had recommended, her hands shaking as she reviewed a document granting temporary guardianship of June and Mina to their biological father. "You don't have to do this," the lawyer said gently, watching her hesitate over the signature line. "Yes," Aaliyah whispered. "I do. They deserve a chance I was never able to give them." She signed her name. That night, she crept into the twins' room one final time. June was curled on his side, one arm flung over Mina's small form in the other bed, the way he always slept when he was trying to protect her even in his dreams. Aaliyah knelt beside them, pressing the softest kiss to each of their foreheads. "Please forgive Mommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. But I loved you. I promise I always loved you." She stood outside the mansion gates a few minutes later and collapsed into the grass, sobbing until she had nothing left. The twins officially moved into the mansion the following week. Hannah treated the transition as though she'd been waiting her whole life for siblings, dragging June and Mina by the hand through every room, showing them the library, the garden, the small greenhouse where Chioma grew herbs for cooking. The mansion, once so unbearably silent, began to fill with the sound of children's laughter echoing through its halls for the first time in years. The Mafia boss did not try to buy their affection. He had learned, painfully, that money had never been the answer to anything that truly mattered. Instead he showed up. Every single morning he sat at the breakfast table with them, listening to June talk about a video game he liked or Mina describe a drawing she'd made. Every single night that his schedule allowed, he sat at the edge of their beds and read to them until their eyes grew heavy. "You don't have to do this every night," June told him once, still slightly wary, still bracing for the moment this man would tire of them the way everyone else eventually had. "I want to," the Mafia boss said simply. "I have a lot of nights to make up for." He kept the wrinkled $5 bill in his wallet from that day forward, tucked behind his most important documents, a constant reminder of the day a 5-year-old boy had taught him something no business deal, no empire, no amount of feared reputation ever could. That love was never something you could buy. But it was always something you could choose to give. Months passed. Marcus, tired of a woman who could no longer offer him the attention he demanded, packed his things one afternoon without warning and left Aaliyah standing alone in the apartment they'd shared, the silence louder than anything Marcus had ever screamed at her. Broken, humbled, and utterly alone for the first time in years, Aaliyah finally understood the full weight of everything she had done and everything she had lost chasing a version of love that had never truly been love at all. She returned to the mansion gates weeks later, her hands trembling as she pressed the intercom button. Chioma answered the door herself, her expression softening with something like understanding when she saw who stood there. "I'm not here to take them back," Aaliyah said quickly, her voice cracking. "I know I don't have that right anymore. I need to see them. I need to apologize. Please." Chioma studied her for a long moment before stepping aside to let her in. The Mafia boss found them in the sitting room a few minutes later, Aaliyah kneeling in front of the twins, her voice shaking as she spoke. "I spent years blaming you both for the pain your father caused me," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. Every time I looked at your faces I saw him and it hurt so much that I forgot how to see you. And that was never, ever your fault. I was your mother. I was supposed to protect you from that pain, not add to it. June and Mina sat frozen, uncertain, years of quiet hurt written plainly across both small faces. I don't expect you to forgive me, Aaliyah continued, her voice breaking completely now. I just needed you to know the truth. That I loved you even when I didn't know how to show it. That none of this was ever because you weren't worth loving. The room held its breath. Then, slowly, Mina rose from her seat and walked toward her mother, her small feet quiet against the marble floor. She stopped in front of her, studying her mother's tear-streaked face for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her tiny arms around her mother's neck. "Mommy," she whispered, her own tears soaking into Aaliyah's shoulder, "please don't leave us again." Aaliyah broke down completely, clutching her daughter to her chest as though she might disappear if she let go. June watched for only a moment longer before he too rose and crossed the room, wrapping his arms around both of them. The Mafia boss stood in the doorway watching the scene with tears he no longer bothered to hide. Then he stepped forward. "I owe you an apology too," he said quietly to Aaliyah, his voice rough. "My fear started all of this. I denied you. I denied them. Every piece of pain that followed traces back to the moment I chose cowardice over you. I'm sorry. I've been sorry for a long time. I just didn't know how to say it." Aaliyah looked up at him through her tears. "We both failed them," she whispered. "In different ways. Then let's stop failing them," he said. "Together if you'll let me." In the months that followed, the two of them slowly rebuilt what fear and pride had once destroyed, choosing patience over blame, honesty over pride, presence over the comfort of old wounds. It wasn't easy. There were hard conversations. There were nights Aaliyah cried from guilt she still carried, and nights the Mafia boss sat awake wrestling with the years he could never get back. But for the first time in either of their lives, they chose to stay and face it instead of running from it. Eventually, on a quiet evening on the mansion's balcony, with the twins asleep inside and Hannah and Chioma sharing a knowing look from the doorway, he took Aaliyah's hand. "I'm not asking you to marry me to erase what happened," he said softly. "I'm asking because I want to build something real with you now. For them. And for us." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes." The final scene unfolds around a long dinner table inside the mansion, candlelight flickering warmly across every face gathered there. The Mafia boss sits beside Aaliyah, his hand resting gently over hers. Hannah laughs at something June says, nearly spilling her drink, while Mina leans contentedly against Chioma's side, the woman who had first taught her what a mother's love felt like and who would remain a permanent, cherished part of the family for the rest of their lives. On a small shelf near the dining room entrance sits a glass case, carefully lit, holding a single wrinkled $5 bill. Beneath it, a simple engraved inscription reads, "The day a little boy taught a rich man that love is the greatest treasure of all."